Hi, everybody. This is Brady Self. I am the Northwest Mississippi Extension Forester. Work for Mississippi State University Extension. And what I want to do is go through the process of how to choose a forestry consultant, hopefully in a short presentation here. We've been getting quite a few questions. I mean, there's always questions about how to find a consultant, but we've been getting more questions here lately due to the storms in the south part of the state over during the last few weeks, last month, as well as some problems that people have with wind in the part of the state. So what I want to go through some things pretty quickly here with you on how do you actually find a consultant and employ them. The first question being, why do you actually need a consultant? That consultant is going to help you put everything together, how to help you optimize your management based on the objectives that you set forth and for your property. And historically, while it may have been money, people, especially go back into the 80s when things were a little different out in the forestry markets, with the timber works, um, the primary goal for a lot of landowners was money. It is not as much as it used to be in today's world. So while money may be important, things like wildlife, recreational type properties, things like hunting, wildlife viewing, things like that come into play and may even take priority over making money for a lot of people. What a consultant can do is combine a lot of those different objectives that you may have for your property and help you set everything into motion to optimize again. Use that word again. We're basically we're trying to blend everything together, give you the best product for what you set forth in your goals. There's a lot of other things out there that a forestry consultant can do. But what we want to do is try to keep this presentation pretty short and boil things down and give you more information on how to actually find those people, how to actually employ a forestry consultant. One of the other things that a forestry consultant can do for you that me as a public as a public servant cannot, along with the people that are with the Forestry Commission, the NRCS, with MDWFP, and we're talking about primarily their private lands biologists, extension as a whole. While we can offer you lots of advice, we can't help you actually make those timber sales. We can't be involved with that side of the world. So consultant is a way to help streamline that process and help you keep getting cheated, basically. Um, when it comes down to actually using one of these guys or gals, when it comes down to actually finding somebody, going through the process of actually putting some type of management practice out on your property, the first thing you need to do is set your objectives. Set what you actually want out of the property, what your goals are. One of the most important things there, right off the bat, is, are you the sole owner? Now that sounds a little funny to some, but what happens a lot of times, if you're not the sole owner and you don't get involved with talking with the brothers and the sisters and the cousins and your mom and dad or whomever may be involved with that property, problems arise, and they arise very, very fast. Everybody's been involved with that or seen something like that, where families are families, but when it comes down to agreeing on something, we're not necessarily the best species in the world to move forward with whatever a plan may be. Once you get everybody on board, once you decide on what your objectives are for the property, whether it be for recreation, forest management to make money, to optimize profits. Once you get everything together, you need to basically put together some form of management plan to help you move forward, to keep everything above board and as you move through those processes. Those objectives that you're developing and you're putting in that management plan, those are yours. Those are not mine. They're not your cousins, unless your cousin's a partial owner. They're not the logger that's going to be cutting the wood. They're not even your friendly neighborhood game warden. Those objectives are yours. It's your property. It's your decision. It's your end goal. Our job as a forestry professional is to help you meet your objectives if it's possible from a biological, economical, and legalistic standpoint. Our goal is not to push our desires for property on you. Is to help you get what you want with those other constraints. A consultant is not the same thing as a timber buyer. There's that misconception out In fact, if your timber buyer happens to be your consultant, you probably are operating in an area that you really shouldn't. There's definitely a conflict of interest there. Consultant is contracted, hopefully, and they are legally responsible for representing your best interest as a landowner in your case to help you maximize whatever benefit you're going to get out of your property. Depending on the consultant, there's a lot of different things that they offer. Anything from full service, meaning from planting the seedling to managing that stand through its rotation to cutting it and putting it on a log truck at the end, all the way down to somebody that you're going to employ just to come out and prescribe burn or to plant the trees or something like that. Different skill sets are with different foresters, different consultants, and there's a lot of there's a lot of wiggle room in that. So depending on the consultant, you may be using one, you may be using two, or three, or four. In Mississippi, from a qualification standpoint, registered foresters as a whole and forestry consultants fall under that are going to have at least a bachelor's degree in forestry. Now, there are still some people out there that were grandfathered in before the law that we're not going to go through established that you have to have a degree to be a forester. There are still some people that are out there and operating, and as a whole, they're fully capable. They've been involved with forestry for many years at this point. But anybody coming in the last 20, 25 years, or probably more than that if you get down to thinking about it, they're going to have that 4-year degree. They're going to be registered with the Mississippi Board of Registration for Foresters. And they are going to not only have the degree, but they have to pass a proficiency exam before they're licensed, before they're registered, and they're going to have to maintain their education through continuing forestry education through credits that are offered. Every 2 years, they have to re-up their certification, basically. You can find these foresters at www.borf.ms.gov. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you kind of how to find them on that website. You type that website in, and you see the BORF website pop up. You look over here on the left-hand side, you see Find a Forester. You'll click on that bullet. You'll see this screen pop up, and what you'll be able to do is query the system. Real easy to use, not complex at all. You can query that system by what county you're looking for someone in, what their last name is, if you know somebody in particular, as well as what city you're close to. And one thing to remember is a consultant, and especially in certain parts of the state, especially I'm thinking over here where I'm at in the Northwest, there aren't a lot of consultants out there, so consultant foresters out there. So just because there's no one in your county or nearby does not mean that you can't find somebody. They will move several counties over to help you. I can think of one guy that comes all the way over from Alabama, believe it or not, to work over on the edge of the Delta in on the west side of the state. So you can pull people from other counties if you have the right type of wood, the right job for them. You have to make money too. Once you query it, once you find find what you're looking for as far as the county or you can pull up individuals and look at their contact information. In this case, this is me. I'm not a consultant, but I am a registered forester, and you can see you've got my expiration date for my license, as well as contact information, address, email address, phone numbers, things like that, as well as what my occupation is. If I were a consultant, if I truly offered services to the public for a fee, see a little tree icon like this pop up on the left-hand side of my name. Those are the individuals that you're going to want to call for employment. What are the qualifications? That is one of the things that we aren't allowed to recommend anyone in particular, but that's one of the things that we can kind of guide you through the process. Once you pull up that list of consultants, you find people that you think you may want to call, you may want to contact. I can't tell you, yes, I would use that individual, no, I would not. But what you can do is you can ask them questions. What type of forestry do they do? What type of forest practices? What type of forest management are they capable of? Pine forestry is not necessarily going to be a good choice for a hardwood forester. There's a lot of differences. Somebody that does hardwood forestry It's probably may or may not be someone that does a lot of prescribed burning, like you would see in a pine stand. So everybody has their skill sets. Again, that's something to think about when you're going through this process. If you're worried about ethical complaints, if they cheated somebody, you can call BORF. And on that website, there's some contact information on their phone, things like that. You can call BORF and you can see if any ethical complaints have been filed against them. I ask them for references. Now they may cherry pick those references. That's fair, but if you ask for references, call them. Call the people that they send you the contact info for, and see what type of job if they were happy was performed. See if they're happy with the service they got out of that particular consultant, and then you can talk with other landowners in the area. Consultants work by word of mouth, and I can promise you, if they have messed up, they've cheated somebody, or even if they messed up in an innocent way, and somebody felt slighted, you're going to know about it. You know how that works with the water cooler talk and the front porch of the old store. That somebody is going to know about that, and you're going to find out real quick. Most importantly, though, you choose somebody that you're comfortable with, somebody that you're happy with, that you feel like is going to do a good job with you, because it is a business transaction. They're offering a service. You want to get the best service out of that fee. Um, Speaking of fees, before I really go into that, that's one of the things that outside of how do I find a consultant, the next question that normally pops out of somebody's mouth is how much am I going to have to pay them? Um, I want to mention a little bit about contracts. Things have changed legally. You don't have to have a contract to sell. They don't have to have a contract to offer you services. Problem with that is that old handshake that we got used to, in the past. The word of mouth type scenario agreement can cause problems. I've seen it where it backfired on the forester, and landowners really didn't want to pay, and I've seen it where it backfired on the landowner and they didn't get the type of service that they wanted. Recently, I've seen some of that. So um, it's probably better to go on and put something on paper. Signed agreement letter may be fine. I would actually prefer to see a contract of some sort. And when you have that contract, everything is there. It's on paper. And you have something to back you up. You have to pursue it, legally speaking. That contract, outside of just who's in the contract, everything you want done on that piece of ground, everything that you're agreeing to should be in that contract. If it isn't, they're not going to be responsible for providing that. Now, if they're reputable, if it's, and most of them are, most consultants are fine. They'll make good on it, but you can't ask them to go back and replant something if it wasn't in that contract. That's a big expense. So just be aware. You need to list everything out, and then you get down to how much do you pay them. And that's the thing that a lot of people are most concerned about. Historically, everything worked off a commission. Things are a little different now with the inability to pay for things like we could. Uh, Traditionally, you saw 5, 10%, depending on the job, depending on what was involved, depending on how much work the consultant was going to have to put. 5 to 10% commission. That's changed. They're having to make a living. Timber prices aren't what they used to be, so you may see that bump up into 15, even 20% in some cases from a commission standpoint. You'll also see per job fees, actual fees, not a commission. Things like management plans, prescribed burning, things like that are actual one-time type option that you're trying to employ somebody to do. You'll see per day costs sometimes with things like bug checks, looking for southern pine beetle, something like that, where the forester is going to go out and he's going to look around the property for however many hours it takes him in a day. You'll also see, in some cases, for absentee landowners, really where this comes up, per year fees, where they'll contract with a consultant to just keep an eye on their property, look for things like pine beetles and storm damage and things like that. So as a whole, like I've alluded to, it really typically pays off to have a consultant. There's situations where you may not need one though. If you have a small acreage, which isn't really going to be attractive for a forester to be able to come in and make any money on, so to speak, or you have the ability to do that type of work yourself on a small acreage, you may not need one. Now, the flip side of that is if you have a lot of value on that small acreage, you may want to consider it. I can think of one case where an individual had 6 acres. of really high quality cherry bark oak veneer. And they had an offer for 25 grand sitting on the table for that 6 acres worth of timber. Most people would have jumped on it. This guy knew a little better, and he knew how to play the market. They did a little work with a consultant, and the next offer came back at 52 grand. So he more than doubled his money through use of a consultant in that particular situation. Also, situations with something like tree planting or prescribed fire, or things like that, where it's a small um, technique or a method or a job that you're putting on the ground, something like that. If you're capable and comfortable doing the work yourself or contracting somebody, you probably don't consult that. And then there's question about first pine thinnings. Is it really necessary to use a consultant because you're talking about quantitative reductions of timber in a pine stand at that first thin versus maintaining the quality in that stand later on with subsequent thinnings? You can get away with it, especially if you use a timber cutter, a logger that is familiar with that type of work. But there is always the risk of really dinging that stand up and having a reduction in that in future value. So it's just something to remember, be aware of. A couple of examples that I want to throw out, actually, then we'll be done here. I like to say what could have been. Um, this particular case, this is just to give you, I said 35-ish, 35% increase in revenue through the use of a consultant is what a lot of the literature shows. Here's some real world examples of that. This particular case, I was helping a lady up in Lafayette County who had a timber buyer show up on her doorstep with a check for $89,000. Sign here, I want to buy your property. And luckily, she kind of scratched her head and said, I'm not so sure about that. Let me talk about this with a few people. We talked, and she wound up using a consultant. About 4 months later, I called her back and asked her, I want to talk with her about it, see whatever happened. And she actually had 3 bids come in from 3 different timber buyers. That timber that was worth $89,000 check in hand turned into something that was worth $476,000. Now, that's an extreme case, don't get me wrong, but it does happen. Folks, that's about 20 cents on the dollar that somebody offered. Again, that's a rarity. That's not always going to happen, but a consultant helps guard against that kind of thing. And at the end of the day, it's like I asked her, and I ask you, would you wait for the difference of $390,000 if it took you 4 months to get it? Most of us would. Tim Troggett, who some of you may be familiar with, was in my job years ago. And I like to throw out a few examples he had that are right in line with this. Here locally from Grenada, Calhoun, I think Montgomery County is where one of these instances came from. But some instances where the use of where someone would offer a certain amount of money and they would say no, we're going to hold off, use a consultant, bring the consultant in and move forward, and they get new bids. Winning bids being the second number you're going to see here. Here's some examples. This particular sale went from 15,000 to 65,000. Here's one that went from 40,000 to 116,000, 100,000 to 226,000, basically. And my favorite one, he was on the ground, and timber buyer comes up, and before the buyer ever opened his mouth, he looked over at the landowner and said, "This guy's going to offer you $100,000. Don't take it." I said, "Really? Don't take it. You get you a consultant. We'll find somebody for you." Guy finds a consultant, comes back, turns $100,000 into $716,000. It happens. Those. Not saying somebody's out there to cheat you, but they're business people, right? They're there to make money. They're there. It's your job to know what your timber's worth. It's their job to give you what you'll take in a lot of cases. So again, those are extreme cases. That doesn't happen all the time. Be aware that a consultant can help you. A consultant can definitely provide the expertise to help you move forward with that forest management, as well as they know how things work. They know the flow of things. So if you have any questions, you can give me a shout at either grady.self@msstate.edu. Contact information there as far as email. That's probably the better place to catch me right now until we're totally moved back into our offices after COVID. Or you can call the office number there, and if we happen to not be in the office, we will get back with you and return your phone call if you'll leave a message. hopefully you get something out of this presentation. And if you have any questions, just give me a shout. Stay safe, stay healthy, and hopefully we will meet up in person. Thank you.